What is up, YouTube? It's Rahul, and I am here bringing you another post-rotation video. Today we're going to be talking about single strike Urshifu paired with Umbreon. I know we did a video on this just a little while ago, but Umbreon being brought into the format does change a lot of things for single strike Urshifu VMAX, and I feel like it's a very strong contender heading into the post-rotation format because you get to cover your weakness, cover a lot of typing, and you do a ton of damage. And eventually there's just so many like single strike cards that are being introduced that you've pretty much hit critical mass with the deck, and it's bound to be good at a certain point. Now, I might not have a video coming up soon in the next days. I know I promised 2 weeks, but I'm currently in the path of Hurricane Ida, so it's storming really badly, and I already have a flooded basement, and there might be some power issues in the upcoming days. So I'll let you guys know how it is. But on that note, let's jump into the deck profile. Now, we all know that Single Strike Urshifu VMAX is the card that came out alongside Rapid Strike VMAX, but this guy didn't really do well. This guy didn't really perform as well as people expected it to. Off the rip, everyone thought this guy would be really strong because of the 270 damage. Basically, you can one-shot stuff with a single strike energy. Houndoom is an easy accelerator multiple times per turn. But as the format kind of developed, we figured out that Rapid Strike Urshifu is just outright superior because of the bench damage sniping, the one energy attack. All these things were, coming into play and making a lot of a difference. But Single Strike Urshifu VMAX does have an attack Gmax 1 blow for 270 damage, fighting, colorless, which you can offset that by using Houndoom, as I'll explain in a second here. And you discard all the damage or the energy from this Pokemon to do a shred effect, basically. So you can go through things like Samazenta V, Decidueye, etc., etc. Now, the first attack Beatdown is also really strong for the 100 damage. So we're playing a 2-2 line of this guy. The baby has Laser Focus, which searches your deck for 2 Fighting Energy attached into this Pokemon, which in this version specifically is not very relevant because we are not playing heavy Fighting Energy. We are focusing on more of just a get set up and kind of do a ton of damage as quickly as we can possibly do, sort of a build. Now, I figured most single strike builds that we've done in the past have had like a very thick amount of energy lines, kind of just ways to deal with everything. But I figured, why do all that when Single Strike has all these cards that are just good in a general sense, and we just make the list as consistent as possible and just focus on getting Houndoom up and running. So Impact Blow is an attack you can use with the Single Strike energies to one-shot a lot of the other Pokemon Vs that exist in the format, so very strong. Here is the new guy coming into the deck, Umbreon V. It is a Single Strike Pokemon. Now, Umbreon V has Moonlight Blade. For a dark and double colorless, it does 80 plus 80 if it already has damage counters on it. So with just a single strike energy accelerated onto it with Houndoom, you are now doing 180 off the bat, which is really strong for a baby V. You're doing a lot of damage. It's not very hard to accelerate. And then you have Umbreon VMAX, which is obviously a very good card because you have a built-in boss's orders to use Dark Signal to bring something up. And then you have Max Darkness, which does 160 damage. Which one-shots Shadow Rider Calyrex. Very important because Single Strike Urshifu is weak to Shadow Rider Calyrex, and Shadow Rider Calyrex is becoming more and more popular. Now, the tandem of these two cards can also deal with decks like Rapid Strike Urshifu very well, because you can one-shot these big VMAXs, you can do a lot of damage out of nowhere, and that's very, very strong for what they do. Now, you now have, and there's a 3-3 line of the Umbreon, because you want to be able to use the Dark Signal multiple times in a game. Max Darkness is a very good attack, and Single Strike Urshifu, while it's like very, very strong, it does have that discard effect that comes along with Gmax 1 blow. So Single Strike Umbreon does become a better attacker in a lot of situations because with Max Darkness you can 2-shot a lot of stuff, and it's just a favorable trade at the end of the day because you can go 2-shot and then bring up this guy, or just go for a 2-shot into a 1-shot with the Single Strike Urshifu. Now here's the core, the lifeblood of the deck. It's a Houndoom. Houndoom Single Strike has Single Strike Roar. Once during turn, you may search your deck for Single Strike Energy attached to one of your Single Strike Pokemon. If you do, you put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. Now, we do know that Single Strike Energy acts as both a Dark and a Fighting Energy, and Houndoom can be used multiple times per turn. So if we have 3 Houndoom set up at any given point, we can power up any of our attackers without a single energy card in our hand, without anything needed. We can either use Beatdown or the other attack on our Max Darkness without having a single energy card in our hand. So having Single Strike Roar is a very, very strong ability. So I wanted to focus this list on getting Single Strike Roar up and running as quickly as possible, just because I think if you don't find those pieces, if you don't find those Houndours on turn 1, if you don't find those Houndooms on turn 2, you're going to start struggling. You're going to really, that's where the deck starts to fall apart at the seams. There's one copy of Crobat. Ideally, this deck is going to have a lot of problems with bench space, so you don't really want to put Crobat down unless you really, really need to, but not having a card like Crobat in a situation where you need to dig for those extra pieces, come off of a bad Marnie, have a strong turn 1 where your opening hand is not that great, but you have a quick ball plus maybe a great ball or something else in the deck or hand. You want to be able to get that Dark Acid ability to kind of fill your hand back up. Now for search cards, we have 4 Evolution Incense, 4 Great Ball, and 4 Quick Ball. Now note the notable omission of Level Ball in this list, because even though most of my standard lists have had Level Ball in them, the only card that benefits off of Level Ball here is Houndour. And once we've kind of gotten our Houndours up and running, it's really difficult to do anything with that. The Quick Ball is past that, and there's no Drizzile, there's nothing else they can get. So Quick Ball acts as our 4 Houndours as well. And then Great Ball is like really pseudo, like a draw, look at your top 7, kind of find something there and put it in, which means it could be a Houndour, it could be your Houndoom, it could be these pieces that you're not really discarding. So this version focuses a little bit more on building your hand and getting it up and running. And then in tandem with a card like Tower of Darkness, which lets you discard a single strike card from your hand and draw 2 cards, you can also start building your card hand, start pitching some of these other cards that we don't really need, these extra Houndours, these extra Houndooms, these extra Umbreons, like cards like that we can just start pitching and putting into the discard. Urn of Vitality shovels up to 2 single strike energy from our discard pile into our deck. It's going to be very, very strong at recycling these energies. We only ever really need to use 2 urns in a game, almost certainly. Maybe a third, depending on how our energy attachments kind of play out. But you never need that 4th, but just having 4 means that if one's prized, we can kind of play the game we want to play. 2 copies of Boss's Orders. Now, this is traditionally low for decks because of the boss, but we do have Umbreon VMAX making its appearance, which means we technically have 5 ways to boss in this deck. And realistically, in a game, we probably only need 2 bosses to kind of close out the game anyway. So one's probably going to be used for stall. Umbreon can do their thing. And in a situation where we're stuck by Path to the Peak, that's really where the boss comes into play. There's going to be 4 copies of Marnie, because once we are set up with our Houndooms and Houndours on the board, we don't really care about how to play from our hand. We don't really care about all these situations where we need to use cards from our hand. So Marnie is just going to be able to keep sticking our opponent into awkward situations, making it harder for them to respond to our single strike attackers. And research, that's the core. 3 copies of Air Balloon. Obviously, everything in this deck has really, really big retreat. 3 on this guy, 2 on this guy, and even Houndoom, I believe, has 2. Yeah. So everyone's got really, really heavy retreat costs. So you want to be able to use Air Balloon to kind of pivot out of the active and move into the situations that you want to be able to move into. The star of the deck, Single Strike Energy. As long as this card is attached to a Single Strike Pokemon, it's Dark or Fighting, plus 20 damage. Very relevant for G-Max 1 Blow. Not so much relevant for Max Darkness, but very relevant for G-Max 1 Blow, because 270, and then you get 3 of these guys on there. We're now hitting for 330, which should be enough to one-shot almost every VMAX in the game. Eternatus is 340, but it's already got fighting weakness, so that poor guy's already going to be in a pickle. But yeah, the deck is just very much like reliant off the back of those. Then we have Capture Energies. So Capture Energy is really, really strong, as opposed to playing other fighting energies and other stuff. I figured playing Capture on turn 1 is really good, because if we have the attachment, that just means we get a guaranteed Houndour every single time, or guaranteed Umbreon every single time. And then from there, you can kind of build up your board with the Great Balls, the other balls, and Capture Energy is just probably the best turn 1 energy to get. Capture is also really good on turn 2, turn 3. Like, it's going to be good in a setup deck like this for the whole game. And then we have 1 empty slot, so I figured I'd just put 1 fighting in there in case we need to use Laser Focus, in case we just need an extra energy card. Typically, Single Strike lists have been playing 10 to 12 energy, so I kind of felt weird going down to 9. But I think the deck is going to work okay. So that is my first iteration on Single Strike Urshifu. If you guys enjoyed the video, remember to subscribe.